So we're pleased to have as our next speaker, Tonya Ladwig from Lockheed Martin. She is responsible for the company's advanced positioning, navigation, and timing PNT mission solutions, including the Global Positioning System 3, GPS 3, and GPS 3 follow-on GPS 3F satellite programs, the GPS Operational Control Segment, OCS upgrades, and the PNT international opportunities. She was most recently the GPS 3 program manager, responsible for managing the cost, schedule, and technical execution of the GPS 3 program, so space vehicles 1 through 10. Prior to that, she was the Navigation System Space Vehicle Segment Director, responsible for the development and production and delivery of all hardware and software in support of space vehicle production of GPS 3 and GPS 3F. She also serves as co-chair of the Lockheed Martin Space Inclusion Council. I'll be showing the slides, but Tonya will be giving the talk. So please give a nice welcome to Tonya.
Great, thank you, Sherman. Good to see everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for having me here today. Thanks for the great introduction. So let's go ahead to the next slide, please. The Global Positioning System, GPS, that's a US-owned utility, and that provides users with position, navigation, and timing services, as you are all very well aware. And it consists of the 3 segments: the space segment, the control segment, the user segment. And nominally, the GPS satellite constellation has about 31 GPS satellites in it. The oldest satellites in today's constellation were launched in the late 1990s, so early 2000s. And at the time, they were the state-of-the-art technology. And even with an original 7.5-year design life, they keep providing that valuable service today. Back in 2008, the Space Force contracted with us, Lockheed Martin, to design and build an entirely new design block of GPS satellites, the GPS 3 satellites, to really modernize the GPS satellite constellation with all of those new technologies and advanced capabilities. So GPS 3 is not an upgrade. It really is an entirely new satellite design, and it's the most powerful GPS satellite ever built. It provides 3 times greater accuracy, up to 8 times increased anti-jamming capabilities. It has the new L1C civil signal compatible with other GNSS systems like Europe's Galileo, which will bring more civil user connectivity in the future. GPS 3 was also intentionally created with a modular design so that as we have new technology and capabilities, we can add that technology or alter the technology as the mission needs change. SV1 through 4 are on orbit and set healthy, and they're used by over 4 billion users worldwide. SV05 was launched this past June, and I'll talk a little bit that more as we go forward in the briefing. Next slide, please. As Sherman mentioned, the Space Force ultimately awarded Lockheed Martin a contract for 10 next generation GPS 3 satellites. At 1 through 5 have been launched over the last 2.5 years, and all have been operationally accepted. SV5 is still undergoing some on-orbit testing, so it's not set healthy yet, but it should be by the end of the year. So if you're keeping track of the modernization, that's about, with the 5 satellites on orbit with these advanced capabilities, that represents about 16% of the constellation. GPS 3 SV05 will also bring the number of military code or M code enabled satellites up to 24. As you're well aware, M code is a more secure, harder to jam or spoof signal, and it's really invaluable to our military forces. The space segment has now met its baseline requirement for M code operational capability with 24 M code capable satellites on orbit. And as you see in my chart, more GPS satellites are coming. Back here at our GPS 3 processing facility in Denver, we're in full production. The GPF, as we call it, was itself designed in a virtual reality environment to maximize satellite production efficiency. And now our satellites move through those production cells in a very commercial production-like fashion for our production. Space vehicles 6, 7, and 8 were declared available for launch in just 3 months over the spring and summer. And our production continues to benefit from efficiencies with each satellite delivery. The first of these recently completed satellites, SV06, is scheduled to launch next year to join the operational constellation. And you'll see in my chart the picture of these 3 Space Force Guardians standing tall in our high bay, ready for the call up for launch. SV9 has been core mated and it's been fully assembled, and SV10 is in component buildup. Sherman mentioned that we're also on contract for the 3F or the 3 follow-on. So we're not done adding new capabilities to the GPS satellite constellation. Back in 2018, the Space Force awarded us a contract to build up to 22 additional GPS-3 follow-on or GPS-3F satellites. In May of 2020, so of last year, we completed our critical design review for GPS-3F. And in July of 2020, the Space Force declared that GPS-3F had fulfilled milestone C, which means we've officially entered the production phase of the program. We're on contract for space vehicles 11 through 14 and should be able to talk about a near-term contract award shortly. So let's go to the next chart, please. Let's talk a little bit about the need for modernizing, and I'm sure it's come up in earlier conversations today, but we're in a battle for space superiority, and it really starts with position, navigation, and timing. Although the GPS constellation is robust and many are living 2 to 3, even 2 to even 3 times beyond their design life, they were built with the newest technology and the best technology available at the time. They're dated, and GPS-3 brings new needed capabilities. China is really launching for capability and not sustainment. They've launched 30 BeiDou satellites and 3 satellites in 5 years. So we've launched less than 2 per year since inception. So meanwhile, BeiDou has launched 24 MEO, 3 GEO, 3 inclined GEO, and soon up to 120 LEO. And I mentioned to you, we've got 3 vehicles that are ready to go with these new capabilities sitting in our high bay waiting for our launch. So part of what we want to share with this group and take the opportunity to talk about is GPS really must also transition from a sustainment mindset to a launch for capability mindset. GPS is a key element of our critical national infrastructure. You all know that very well. And it's actually, it's an absolute imperative that we support the military options in the GPS contested domains. We're also doing additional modernization and capability development and getting that insertion and leveraging the ability to insert that technology into the production vehicles needs to be a top priority. We have transitioned to the LM-2100 combat bus. That's coming on Space Vehicle 13 and up. So that has more size, weight, and power, more swap for hosted payloads. We need to get on-orbit reprogrammability into the baseline. We don't have that now. There's a little bit right now as we move to a fully digital payload with GPS-3F, but we really need that to counter the jamming and spoofing. We need to really employ inter-satellite links for rapid warfighter effects and that constellation autonomy. I think there's an assumption with so many that that's already part of the baseline, and it's actually not. And then we also need to work across the US and the government allies for some of the complementary resilient LEO and GEO PNT capabilities. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Next slide. I mentioned that GPS-3 brings 8 times higher anti-jamming power and 3 times greater accuracy with a longer design life. GPS-3 also adds that 4th civil signal L1C. GPS-3 satellites add even more capabilities to the constellation. So we're, like I mentioned, we're into production of those. We're starting to build up our GPS non-satellite, non-flight test bed this spring. And with these new generation of GPS-3 follow-on satellites, we get the additional capabilities. Brad mentioned regional military protect. That's coming on GPS-3F satellites. That'll increase that anti-jam support in theater to really ensure our US and allied forces can't be denied access to GPS in hostile environments. It also adds a fully digital navigation payload. So the payload on the first 10 GPS-3 satellites is already 70% digital. This gets us 100% digital. With 3F also comes a laser retro reflector array that allows for the positioning of on-orbit satellites to be refined with that ground-based laser precision. The precise positioning of each satellite obviously ultimately enhances the positioning signals they generate, which will lead to greater GPS accuracy. Additionally, the US government will provide each GPS-3F with a new search and rescue payload. So that'll be new for the GPS constellation. These hosted payloads spread around the globe on GPS-3F satellites will make it much easier for first responders to detect and then respond to emergency signals. GPS-3F will also use, like I mentioned earlier, our modernized LM-2100 satellite bus, and that will drive efficiency and cost reduction through more commonality of processes and procedures. It also provides additional swap, size, weight, and power, along with a modification to allow for late hardware insertion from hosted payloads. Why that's important, as we're looking to have cross-mission capabilities on the GPS satellites. Having that additional swap is beneficial, but the hosted payloads, if they're newer technologies, they might come later in the single line flow. So allowing for that later hardware insertion allows us to have the most recent technology actually on our satellites. And we're also working on some studies to on-ramp that reprogrammability and the enhanced cross-links. Slide 6, please. A little bit more on those capability modernizations I alluded to. We're already modernizing the GPS constellation and continue to drive that modernization by driving additional capabilities into our baselines. This additional on-orbit reprogrammability allows for tech insertion and adaptation to evolving threats while on orbit. So that makes operating beyond our design life no longer a handicap. That allows us to, update it on orbit. And I can't get into too much detail, obviously, in this forum, but this will improve our signal resiliency and our performance. Adding the enhanced command and control will also further augment our PNT mission. That'll give us the ability to lower the age of data. When we lower the age of data, that increases our accuracy. And that also allows us to increase our mission resiliency and autonomy, ultimately enabling those near real-time rapid warfighter effects that we desire. And last but definitely not least, with that opportunity to, as a nation, to leverage that spare swap on the GPS platform, we're driving a modular open system approach and reducing the cost to integrate those future capabilities. That allows for hosted payloads to be, again, integrated later in the flow of vehicle buildup. And these interfaces are also COPAIS compatible. That's the common payload interface standard, and that'll maximize our implementation flexibility. Next chart. So a little more on the greater U.S. international PNT cooperation. We're in the situation right now where multiple nations are reviewing their PNT requirements, both as a critical national infrastructure and their defense needs. An example, the UK is looking right now for greater PNT capability as a sovereign nation based on their current position with the Galileo program after Brexit. And other nations around the globe are doing similar evaluations of these needs. We're working with our international partners to optimize the solution. So I was out at DESI or DSEI in the UK a few weeks ago. We were at National Space Symposium and had some interactions with ministers of defense for different countries. We're responding to those official information requests that we're getting from those countries, and have had multiple discussions about providing the UK an assured PNT system in lieu of their previous involvement in Galileo. There's a lot of opportunity there. Without getting into specifics, since we're in an open forum, when we talk about getting that those additional capabilities on our GPS, there's a coalition collaboration opportunity with the US government to really augment the GPS constellation while meeting the international sovereign needs too, that we're looking to encourage those conversations so we can have a mutually beneficial capability between the countries. And the overarching goals we really have here and why we're pushing this is we really need to increase that resiliency while reducing the impact of PNT infrastructure. We're all aware of the budget concerns and the budget pressure. And so the more we can really generate that greater collaboration between the US and international partners to meet the overall PNT needs, that the better we'll stand with our position, navigation, and timing capabilities with US and our allies. And next slide. Let's talk a little bit about SBAS. So we're also directly involved with the second generation of SBAS. That's the satellite-based augmentation system. This system provides greater confidence for that position, navigation, and timing, that leveraging that dual frequencies and signals from the other GNS systems. SBAS really gives the user the highest level of integrity for accurate and safe navigation. Here at Lockheed Martin, we've worked to leverage both the GPS-3 L5 signal and Galileo. We've developed the first prototype of the dual frequency multiple constellation SBAS, or DFMC. We've demonstrated that capability now through our testbed in Urala, Australia, and we're looking at the requirements to provide an SBAS service for our military operations. So how can we take what we're using for our critical national infrastructure, provide that same signal integrity capability for the military operations? And with Stanford, so over the past 10 years, Lockheed Martin Space has really supported the Stanford Center for Position, Navigation, and Timing. It's been a great partnership. The support's proven to be really mutually beneficial for a way for us to advance the state of knowledge of this advanced PNT. So some areas of collaboration for those that aren't aware: the dual frequency multiple constellation space-based, satellite-based augmentation. That began with the Lockheed Martin Space early work on DFMC SBAS in about the 2015-2016 timeframe. The Stanford PNT community provided an independent review of the integrity and the safety architecture, and that included alignment with the Emergency International Civil Aviation Organization standard and recommended practices, and also the top-level system architecture. Stanford also provided an independent assessment of the Galileo threat model for DFMC SBAS and looked at the solution options and the trade studies for the advanced RAIM, which is as we heard earlier, it's a candidate solution for that precise assured navigation for military users. That's included the candidate integrity support message types and content, and some of the service volume modeling on the resulting performance. Last but not least, we've worked with Stanford for the assured precise point positioning. That's also a key component of SBAS for the emerging applications that require that better accuracy than is possible with the current SBAS, but may not have the same integrity requirements. All right, and then last, in summary, kind of looking at the modernization and the next steps. So we all know that GPS is a key part of our critical national infrastructure. It enables over $1 billion a day in economic benefits. It's also a key enabler for our US military dominance. We need to continue to deliver the modernized GPS 3 and 3F to orbit. So building them and keeping them in our factory, it isn't getting that capability to our users. And it's not about replenishment anymore. It's about getting these new capabilities operational and available to the warfighter and to the world. The technology is evolving, and we really need to continue to on-ramp these advanced capabilities into our production line. I know that there's a big focus on alt PNT, and I'll use my somewhat cheesy example. We need, when you're running a hospital, you need backup electricity, but you also want to really have a really healthy electrical grid that you're using day in and day out. And when we've got a production line, we've got these capabilities that we can build and deliver and on-ramp these technologies. On-orbit reprogrammability and crosslinks are not new technologies. They have high TRL. It's just a matter of being able to prioritize the RDT&E budget to get these capabilities on these platforms. So as technology evolves, we need to continue to on-ramp these advanced capabilities into the production line to really ensure we've got active and resilient assured position navigation and timing. And we've got to get that capability launched. We need a launch for capability. Another piece of that too is on-ramping the NTS-3 capabilities to the GPS program of record. So L3 Harris is a partner of ours in our mission data unit. They've been working on the NTS-3 capabilities, and we're working with the Space Force to take that prototype capability and on-ramp that into the production programs. We also need to integrate that autonomy and those resilience capabilities with crosslinks and that on-orbit reprogrammability, and leverage those partnerships to strengthen GNSS through our allied augmentation that we're able to do, or hope to do, or look to do, aspire to do, I should say. And finally, with our MEO platform and our combat bus, there's an opportunity to leverage our MEO platform for an array of cross-mission payload hosting opportunities. And we want to make sure that we're set up to be able to leverage that for US and our allied forces. And I know all of you are totally, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we really need to recognize how critical GPS and PNT is to our warfighters and our nation, and continue to modernize this national asset to evolve it for the future, safeguarding the signal the world has come to rely on. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have for me. Let's see, in the Q&A, there's one that says, what is the basis for claims for increased accuracy on GPS 3 and 3F? Improved frequency standards giving rise to reduced broadcast message prediction error. There's a number of things on GPS 3 and 3F. A lot of it has to do with our clocks and the stability of those clocks for increased accuracy. As far as the exact calculations, we can't offer that up in a public forum, unfortunately. And then what is the current and near future capability in servicing above the GPS constellation users like geo satellites, vehicle to the moon, maybe related to side lobe signal strength. We've talked a little bit in the past about the space service volume for cislunar. We are exploring that, but there's nothing else I can really comment on that Lockheed Martin is able to talk about publicly with some of those capabilities right now. Are there any other questions?
What do you think?
Yeah.
Hi, Tonya. Thanks for that great talk. Lots of things to consider. What do you think would really drive us to on-ramp more because of capability than for sustainment? GPS-3 offers a lot of new capabilities that we haven't seen in the past. Is there one technology that you really think will push that, or is it really kind of the whole mass of different capabilities that GPS-3 and 3F will offer that will hopefully
there's
push
already a lot of
us to
capabilities on there, Sherman. When you talk about how GPS works, right? The more of those satellites you have on orbit as part of the constellation, the more you're able to leverage those capabilities, right? So part of it is getting those capabilities that are already going to be built on the 3 and the 3F satellites actually operational. But when you're looking, there's a whole host of capabilities we've been looking at on-ramping onto GPS-3 and 3F, but the two really that are most critical are that on-orbit reprogrammability, because that really gives us that flexibility in the future, and those crosslinks. One other thing that I didn't really mention that I'll talk about, I talked about going to the Evolved Combat Bus. We at Lockheed Martin actually have the ability to implement our Aspen docking station as part of that Evolved Bus. We haven't worked with the Space Force yet to make that part of our baseline, even though we're part of have the Evolved Bus for SV-13 and up. That's another opportunity then to be able to add capabilities to vehicles that are actually on orbit in the future too. So those are kind of the top three things: the on-orbit reprogrammability, the crosslinks, and then getting that Aspen dock as part of our baseline to allow the future space augmentation.
And I saw in your talk that the on-orbit reprogrammability is meant to support both military and civil users, and also trying to onboard some of the NTS-3 ideas. So that means it will support concepts like Chimera, where we modify an existing signal to insert. Okay.
Yep. So I clarify how crosslinks will be used on GPS-3 or 3F. But we don't have them on GPS-3. We don't have them yet on GPS-3F. When you start talking about crosslinks, right, you talk about constellation autonomy. So right now, when we're working with our GPS satellites, you actually have to have ground contact. So when we're, say, uploading software or loading the data adjustments, right? We actually have to do that when we're in contact. Where if you could actually upload that to a vehicle and then use the constellation to propagate that to other vehicles, you get that autonomy that you don't have right now as part of the constellation with the crosslinks. And if you talk about tasking, you're in the same situation, right, with real-time warfighter effects. Right now, we actually have to have that visibility to task the vehicle. But if you can task certain vehicles through the other vehicles, you can see how much more quickly we have those rapid warfighter effects in play.
Question was, are crosslinks used for data transfer only?
Right now, that's really what they would be used for. Yes, the crosslinks that we're looking to onboard right now for GPS-3F. But you could talk about what that could look like if you had different kinds of crosslinks in the hosted payload space, right? Also, additional comms payloads as part of that hosted payload space. That's why it could be much more long-term than just data transfer crosslinks.
I think we're close to our break, or we're at our break. I'd like to thank all the speakers.